Hi everybody, it's Stephen Brooke and welcome to my YouTube channel on architectural photography and composition. I've entitled this episode, Be Your Own Client. Let me share two quotes with you that I've always found interesting. Both of them refer to the same thing. The great alto saxophonist Charlie Parker always said, you can't think and play at the same time. And Yogi Berra, the great Yankee catcher, said, you can't hit and think at the same time. And obviously what they were talking about is the value of practice so that when the time comes for you to actually do what it is you need to do, you have already gone through what you need to be able to do your job the right way, instead of trying to figure out everything right there on the spot, confronting things that you've never thought about. So what I want to suggest to you when I say be your own client is I want you to think about practicing your interior photography at home. To use your residence, wherever it is and whatever you have, as kind of a laboratory for your own design ideas. And really, and this is what I tell my students as well, I should be able to walk into wherever it is that you stay and know that somebody in the design profession lives there. Now, my mentor, Mark Hampton, who was an architect, a designer, furniture collector, botanist, and landscape architect, always told us your home should be camera ready almost at any time. And when you went to Mark's house, it almost didn't matter. It was almost always camera ready. Let me show you. This is his living room, and everything that he's arranged, he's thought about. If he's sitting idly by, he'll look over his table and maybe make a few changes. He was always experimenting with design, experimenting with still life. His bookshelves were always just right. This is his kitchen. Whether he was serving or not serving, you could walk in there anytime and literally take a photograph anywhere and it would be just right. Here's another one. So one of the things I'd like to do today is I would like to go over some really important details for interiors. We'll discuss more of these in another video, but I find that these are really important and worth going over, worth reviewing, so that when you look at your space, you can try to make some of these changes for the better. One of the most important is hanging artwork. And most artwork is really hung too high. And it can easily destroy the sense of scale in the room. So on the left is an image of an interior, and the paintings here above this table are the correct height. But I manipulated them in the photograph to show what happens if you place them up too high. And they completely change the relationship between the paintings and the table and chairs. And also they call attention to the ceiling, which they don't do in this case. So let's look at, here are 4 images that I've taken at the NSU Art Museum in Fort Lauderdale. And let's try to see what's going on here. There are a variety of hangings here. These are all single items. Here's a group of items. Here's a combination, single and group. What do museums use as their standard for hanging artwork? And this is really important, especially if you're trying to assist your client before the photography session and they're wondering what to do about hanging art or where their art is. If you know these rules, you can help them. And the most important one is that the center of any piece of art should be somewhere between 57 and 58 inches off the ground. Now, if it's a really low ceiling, 57 is probably best. If it's a very high ceiling, 58 inches is best. But not any higher and not any lower, except if it's in a really unusual situation. Now, if you have a group of them, they should all be hung with the centers at between 57 and 58 inches. Avoid the kind of 1950s rec room hanging where you had one here and one here and one here. I recommend not doing that. Now, if you have stacked images, The center is not the center between the images. You add the height of one, the height of the second, the space in between, and the midpoint should be at between 57 and 58 inches. If you're hanging items that are of different heights, again, don't make the tops even or the bottoms even. That gives a kind of artificial line to the room. Make all the centers between 57 and 58 inches off the ground. Now, if that dimension brings your piece below, let's say, the back of a sofa, or brings it below the back of a break front or cabinet, the minimum distance between the bottom of that item, whatever it is, and the bottom of your piece should be 4 inches, no less than that. Here's a perfect example over here. 57 inches would have brought the bottom of this piece somewhere in here. We needed to lift it up to get it to 4 inches between the top and the bottom of the painting. So now when you look at these photographs at the NSU Art Museum, you can see that the curator has followed those rules exactly. Here's a variety of heights, and they're all 58 inches off the ground. Here's a grouping. Note here, this is 58. Here's the grouping here, and the middle of these two is at 58 inches. So when you look around the place where you live, check and see where you've placed your artwork. Maybe you only need to change it by a few. If you're really tall, the tendency is to hang something up too high. Again, between 57 and 58 inches. Tabletops and bookshelves, think of them as individual still lifes, and if you'd like a deeper dive on that, my video on still life photography, we discuss still life in depth, the history of still life painting, and some suggestions as what you can do at home to practice still life. But in terms of interiors in general, I want you to think of bookshelves and think of tabletops as their own still life. Here's one item. When you're photographing books, try to not show the edges of the book. Show the spines of the book. That's where the work has gone in the design. This isn't very attractive, but here you can see the lettering. It's nice and smooth. It makes a nice rhythm rather than showing the edges of the book. Now, if you're shooting here and you move around to that side, if I can, I will always turn the books so that the spines are facing the camera. Another thing about bookshelves, this is really unacceptable. What I want to encourage you to do is to what they call fronting in the grocery industry, when they bring everything towards the front of the shelf to make a nice, clean, even look. Bring the books forward, but leave a little space between the edge of the bookshelf and the edges of the books, because that gives you one little reveal. You get a little bit of reflection there so that you're not looking at just the edges of the books, which may be irregular, but this actual line here that this creates is very regular and gives nice order to the bookshelves. Here's a good example. This is Raul Rodriguez, a close friend of mine and a wonderful architect. His bookshelves are absolutely beautiful. And you can walk in, when we're talking about camera ready, you can walk into Raul's house anytime and just shoot. Now, if you don't have enough books or objects to fill a bookshelf, and this will happen if you have a client who's just newly moved into a project, into a house, they don't have enough stuff, but you still have to make the photographs and you still have to make everything look great. So think about the bookshelf like a single composition. And here's a good guide. Look how Mondrian uses white areas to balance where the color is. So this is a perfect example. This is Suzanne Martinson Architects. And in this bedroom, we didn't have, actually, we brought in everything because they actually hadn't moved in yet. And we didn't have enough stuff to fill all of these spaces. So this is kind of what we were thinking about when we put this together. So there's also something that creates movement within this little composition. And if you look at the red elements, we've arranged those to move your eye through the image. Starting here, moving to these red items, moving here, 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 and back to create this little rhythm within. Why red? Because we've talked about this before in perspective. Reds and yellows tend to advance to the eye, blues and greens tend to recede. The red objects will jump out at you, and if you arrange them properly, you'll have something where your eye will move through this. But again, note how we've used empty spaces and filled spaces in some kind of a harmonious way. Flower arrangements, this is really important. And sometimes you have to step in and hold your client back. What I recommend is keep it as simple as possible. Think about the flowers and whatever they are in as a compositional element, and I usually recommend one species per vase. In this case, this is Christine Desiree. She has these beautiful little orchids, and I've put them so that they are in front of this wood panel back here, because without it I have a bare wood panel and I didn't need two. This is again Suzanne Martinson, one nice little display of flowers. Why this yellow? If you look at the yellow in the hat, I wanted to get something in here to relate to this one little spot of yellow. Orchids down here, they break the plane. They're white, sort of whitish, to balance this painting. And here in Dennis Jenkins, there is so much activity here. He decided what he didn't need is another element with a lot of density to it. So all he put in here was just this one monstera leaf, which reflects here and reflects here. Now, there was a style of architectural photography, interior photography, back in the mid to late 70s. And if you had a ceiling, you had a wall, and you wanted to kind of blank that out, you would haul in a plant and it would fill half of the frame and it would look something like this. Please don't do that. What happens is your eye just gets fixated on this massive green. Do your composition in such a way that if you have blank areas, they are all compositional. Don't stick a hunk of flowers in the foreground or a bunch of leaves. Please don't do that. If you want to see flower arrangement taken to as high an art as can be, Google minimalist Japanese flower arrangements and you will see how the masters do it. If you haven't been to Cotillion, make sure you know how to set the table right. There's a breakfast setting, there's a lunch setting, there's dinner setting, there's formal dinner setting. You need to see what your clients have and decide if you're going to shoot breakfast, how you're going to do that. But make sure you know, really, make sure you know where all the silverware goes. Even little details like this when you arrange a knife, that the blade of the knife, the cutting edge, is aiming inside. So this is a good thing to know when you're setting up a table. Typically, dining room tables are big, and I almost always set them up. Otherwise, I have a bowling alley. Fix the fringe. I can't tell you how many photographs I see where I'm looking down at the rug and the fringe is all over the place. Make it neat, make it tidy, make it compositional. Same thing like when you're in a bathroom and you're shooting the towel, shoot the folded edge of the towel, not the other side, because this is neater, this is cleaner. Same thing with a napkin. Let me see the folded edge, not the loose edge. Lampshades, if you have a seam on your lampshade, turn that away from you. If you can't turn it, make sure you get rid of it in Photoshop. We don't like that. Cords, get rid of all of them. Sometimes you can hide them, but if not, make sure you clone them out, particularly in the kitchen, because all of these appliances have cords. Get rid of them. Get rid of, if you can, get rid of the socket as well. And here's part of the cord hanging down there. Make it as clean as you possibly can. If you're shooting a commercial job, and this is a real pain, but you have to do it, is to make sure you align all of the wheels, all going the same way, all aimed in one direction. It makes for a much better shot. Don't just have them randomly laid out there. Now, we talked about the signature shot being the single most important photograph that you're going to take. And if you haven't taken a look at my video on the signature shot, go have a look at that, because I discuss the one most important photograph that you can take of your project. Every interior has a place for the signature shot. The one best position where everything comes into play. When you want to start arranging things in a room, find that signature shot first and then make your arrangements based on where you're standing. There's usually one place that everything comes together, and then arrange the big things first, then the smaller things, then tabletops and bookcases. So remember, be your own client. Where you are is a perfect opportunity for you to think about and express your own design ideas, and take out your camera, set everything up as if you were really shooting. Very often in places like museums or museum houses or clients who are really fussy, you may not have the liberty of taking all the time in the world that you want to do your shots. They may be, come on, are you still shooting? Why is this taking so long? Particularly if it's someone who has not been around architectural photography and who doesn't know how intense it really is and how much time it takes. So if you are under the gun, it's a good idea to have thought through as many of these compositional arrangement problems as you can. In other words, you don't want to have to think and hit at the same time. You'll be ready to go. Also, in my book, Architectural Photography and Composition, I have preparation for photography guidelines. And what I've done is listed everything that I know that's could potentially be an issue for you and your client. And I send that to my client, they send it to their client, so they know we mean business when we show up. And all of these particular issues that could cause us trouble, that could take a lot of time once we're there, hopefully those will be taken care of before we arrive. So again, have a look at StephenBrookePhotography.com for my book on architectural photography and composition. We talk about all of these things in there. And have a look at Stephen Brooke Editions, my books on Rome, Miami, Jerusalem, seaside views of the new town. They're all available in really convenient ebook form, inexpensive, and I think if you're interested, particularly in black and white photography, I think you'll find them interesting. Thanks very much for looking in. So if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already to see more videos like this, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.